So magandang umaga. Good morning to all of you. Pwede may tutulong, Joyce. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity that you have given me to share whatever little knowledge, information, and experiences I've had for working on the Philippine environment, particularly since 1995. That means matanda na ako. And I'm happy to be sharing this so that there are young people here who will continue to work. Biodiversity is a concept that's easy and difficult to understand. Many will consider it as a simple term, lodged only with those in biology, but others like me consider biodiversity as what summarizes our links to everyone. It is a term, it is a concept that speaks of our interconnectedness as Homo sapiens sapiens, dealing with the other flora and fauna in our Mother Earth. So in a sense, it's a very big concept for me. I've been asked to talk about biodiversity and climate change. These are two very broad concepts already. In the Philippine environment, that's a third complex word that we're going to tackle this morning as context or scope of the discussion. The outline will flow this way. I will first talk about the state of biodiversity in the country, and in doing so, give an idea about what biodiversity status we have, what ecosystem services are important coming from our appreciation also of biodiversity, and connect this to climate change. And then, after presenting the state or the status, we'll look into the challenges, hopefully, and we'll try to identify some of the things we can do as way forward. We can talk about some framework, some ideas from the strategy components, and modalities of engagement. I am very happy to note that this is a conference, that's just a forum, right? You refer to it already. A forum is usually for just half a day, but this is 3 days, okay? And there is action at the end of the theme, which is more important. As advocates, we don't just talk about it. We walk the talk. We put in action what we talk about. So I prepared a 2-pager handout. I hope you have a copy. And I share this because usually in seminars or in conferences, people just make the presentation and everybody assumes that those important items are recalled, will be remembered. In our generation now that's so used to using the internet and the computer and presentations like this, PowerPoint presentations, we assume that we are able to absorb already and appreciate the most important concepts to put into action. But because of the many concerns, we tend to forget these important things. So I hope that you will take this as a handout to remember what we are working with at different scales and at different levels, And so be guided with where you may put into action. Okay? So, kung walang kopya, similin nyo si Vicky, dalawang kopya dito. Okay. So, I'm not going to discuss many things. That's why I put them here for you to remember. But this is the starting point in our appreciation of biodiversity in the Philippines. We have to know what the Philippines is like and what are the key aspects of our archipelagic setting we must remember. So we have 7,100 plus islands, meaning, is it easy or difficult to unite the Philippines? Okay? So what I would like to emphasize there is the archipelagic setting. We are united by the waters, not by the land. That's why our discussions, even with China and the Philippines at the West Philippine Coast, is very important. Because if we know the territorial limits of our existence as a nation, we should be able to unite as a nation to really protect our environment in our Mother Earth. Okay. The second point is the formation of the archipelagic setting has gone over 50 million years. And the biological wealth started to develop only, let's say, in the past 30 million years. Nagsimula na yan, ano? Whereas, Homo sapiens tayo would come about only from 5 million years thenceforth, which means there's a lot of variability in our biological resources that have been formed even earlier, and particularly in Philippines archipelagic setting, we have to deal with that. That's the basis for saying we prefer to use and be enhancing of the native species, because these were formed over the past 300 years, see? And we cannot just do away with those by getting more and more and more imports from other countries to enrich our biological resources. The more we depend on what we have had is really the best way to survive. Not to keep on getting these resources from outside of the country. So we are rich in endemic species and in a very diverse biological setting. Having this endemic species gives us an opportunity to give a contribution to the global biological richness. We are rich in the biological resources, and we are still rich in those that we have. That's why we can really talk about endemic species, because these are contribution to the global patrimony. Meron na tayong ibinabahagi sa daigdig bilang isang bansa. Okay? Huwag na kayo mag-isip ng mga Miss Beautiful, Miss Philippines, kasi mas importante ito na ibibigay natin sa daigdig. And these are linked in ecosystems with very ecological services from reef to reef. That's something that must be realized in our archipelagic setting. Sorry. We are a small country. About 60 to 70% are really in very steep topographically, no? Mas papataas yung mga islands natin. Maraming kalupaan Ang flat area dyan ay mga 30% lang. Okay? We know that being here in the Cordillera. Our coastline is very long. We have very rich inland waters. And for our territorial limits, we have not really touched the rest of our archipelagic richness in our marine resources. But these resources are being lost fast. So we must move fast to protect and preserve them. About 70% of the population is still rely on the marine resources, the coastal and marine resources. Our coastal resources are being gone already, and our marine resources far off the islands are fast being used by the other countries already. And we cannot control that. Why? You know very well why we cannot control it. We don't have a good navy to protect our waters. Okay, we'll not talk about those problems. We'll discuss them later. So, we have a mega diversity character. We are one. When we started assessing the state of Philippine biodiversity in 2001, 2002, 2003, we were among the 17 diversity countries. 2 years ago, we were among the 17 mega-diverse countries. 2 years ago, we were among the 25 mega-diverse countries. Something is happening there. Are we still the top one by unit area, or are we falling because we're losing many of the species? That's a big question that those who are assessing the state of biodiversity are always looking into. Are we having more threatened species and a few more getting even extinct? Or because we are discovering more new species, we are in fact getting nature. That's the push and pull thing that we are always looking into. But we'll realize a little later why we are saying we're very rich in the species, and therefore we are still one of the top 3 mega-diversity countries. But that's because of these ecosystem services that we are enjoying and be provided for by the environment. I had to list them down because people usually do not know and therefore do not appreciate these things. Climate security. Okay, you have that in your copy, so I will not read the rest. Water security, food security, health security, I hope that was established yesterday. Cultural values and option values. Last two are usually ignored in the computation of the country's wealth. Because they are the most difficult to measure, but that's what the Philippines, with 120 IP groups and about 70 major ethno-linguistic groups, can use to our advantage to protect us. Okay? When you have questions, we'll get into that later if you want. No? But You have this list, and we're going to explore more what this means. Now, I had to include this also. It's very difficult for some people who may be very sectoral only in their view. Health lang, culture lang. Pero hindi nakikita yung ibang ecosystem services, no? Na makikita natin sa ating very diverse biological setting. I am in research methodology also, and I had a chance to work with at least 7 taxon-based groups who are all from the biology discipline when we assess the different areas in the country and to say that these are the areas to protect. I will give you an idea why the scientists who were working on that assessment, they resulted in 128 key biodiversity areas to be accepted by the Philippine government as the areas to be protected. It's because of this. The more areas we can identify as needing protection, that gives those in government, whether they are national government agencies or local government units, to say, hey, so we must protect these areas. Instead of waiting for the government to identify for us what should be protected, those in the academe and at the grassroots level, scientists said, hey, you protect all of this because of the 7,100 islands. There are these 128 key areas that must be prioritized. Okay? That gives no room for the government to say the money is only for 2 areas. Okay? And that gives a challenge to those at the ground level to say, hey, you see, the scientists are saying that our area must be protected. So you must consider us in the planning. You know, it gives room for those local areas to say their area must be protected. Kung sabahan na yan ng scientists at ng mga tao nasa ground level to influence how the government must think in allocating resources, these scarce resources. So, usually, we identify what the state of the environment is by looking into the pressures. So these are what we have here as the direct and indirect factors that tend to cause the destruction or the reduction in biodiversity health. To say that these are the services that are attached to those drivers, indirect and direct factors, and therefore these services are what we must, in very specific terms, include in our very sectoral kind of planning also. For instance, for provisioning services, wood, fiber, water, biochemicals. Even if you look at the forests are not trees. Forests are all of this. These are the services of the forest. The ones listed there. These are the services of the environment that the planners, who usually are economists, these are the services that are not computed, and because they are difficult to monitor and compute, therefore they are disregarded. I'm married to an economist. And he says, the more important thing to protect are those that cannot put a cash value to. Because protection of these services is a political move. And political action cannot be measured in terms of expense or earnings. Although government officials use cash valuation for all their actions. Okay? Kaya mas madaling ikwenta ang gagastusin na kitain sa mining. But hindi na bibilang ang epekto ng mining. Okay? That's just an example. So we can go back to this in a little while. So what are these diversity and richness that we have? I have put that summary here, but this is what I mean. We have estimated, look, this is about 15 years ago when we made the assessment. We have estimated 10,000 to 14,000 species for plants. At least half are endemic. You see how rich we are? That's why in reforestation, we have changed that word to use rainforestation. There is a paradigm shift already that we are saying we must do by saying we want to protect and enhance our plants and tree species in forests with endemic or native species only. Okay? So, these half endemics, are they getting lost or not? When you look at even the framework of FAO, it was FAO, that's a UN unit, that said, okay, you do reforestation, you plant more Jamelina. So Jamelina was brought in, it was planted everywhere. The DNR prioritized it in all reforestation projects. But what is Jamelina? In 5 years, that tree would be rotten, but it will continue to suck into the ground level and get as much of the nutrients and the water in areas planted with Jamelina. That's not endemic, that's not native. That's exotic. So after 20 years or so, the DNR began to accept the fact that they were party to the reforestation that's very bad for our country. If you look into the NGA, the National NGP, National Green Program, we have been having, I'm including the assessment already, we are saying we must plant more native tree species of tree species. But for the past 15 years, the DNR is not yet doing that, but their NGP is still planting exotic species. 2 weeks ago, there was a launching of the book. That's the title, Paradigm Shift. Because we are offering the rainforestation. I think it will be available for sale by early next year. But this was launched just 2 weeks ago. So that's the richness in endemics that we have for plants. For birds, 34% native. Okay. Siyempre, kung yung habitat ay yung mga puno, Yan din ang native birds natin. Correct? Pag pinalitan mo ang puno, o wala din yung mga ibon na yan. Okay, I'll do this fast. We have reptiles. 66% are endemics. Amphibians, 78% are endemic. See? Importante si palangang koka. We have for insects, 70% endemic. And they're important also for pest control. Take note of that, though. The herbs and the insects I'm talking about are those that help in the reproduction and in pest control, okay? Particularly for farming areas. Native. They're found here. And that's the source of our global patrimony, our pamana sa buong daigdig. All in the Philippines. Okay. The richness that we have, that is already with us, must not be lost. So instead of a forest or an area with trees, that are different kinds of trees, not just pine tree, instead of SM, let's have that kind of forest. Okay? And we have these inland waters. Ang dami-dami na. But what's sad is about 70% are dead. Okay? The riverine resources, plants and animals, are being lost, have died. But what's cool is the phytoplanktons are also adjusting. Nagkakaroon ng pagbabago. Tingnan natin kung magsusurvive o hindi. But ang importante ay kaya natin makontrol yung nangyayari. But, you know, if more and more dams are being built, that will change the flow of the waters. And if there are more and more land conversion that will also be done, that will lead to sedimentation and more minings that will lead to siltation, you will have dead rivers. Okay? Marami tayong species na kailangan i-protect dyan. Mangroves, 40 species. You see this? 54 species have been identified in the entire world. Apong. 40 are in the Philippines. Okay? It's very easy to see photos of these species. But what we must appreciate, what we must guide us always is, this is the endemism and this is the richness that we must protect. Not just any tree. I was talking to somebody years ago who said, we are propagating Apollonia trees by having this spread out through helicopters. Sabi ko, don't do that here because that's from China and we don't need plantation. Yeah, in the Philippines, native species. And then he said, oh, so there's a difference between exotic and native? Yes. So you must stop spreading this through helicopters. Okay? And then corals, 500 of the 800 plus known, we have the richest. In the Philippines, there's the core in the Sulawesi seascape. Kahit isama nyo ang Indonesia, Malaysia, Solomon, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, marami ang nasa Pilipinas. And this is a source of the marine resources. Dito lumalaki ang mga isda. Kung walang coral, dahil ginagamit na sa pandemorin, pati sa mga yung anak ko ay nang gumamit ng florals ng ano. Kasi dapat hindi na ginagamit pang ano na bololo eh. Yung pala dami. When we're organizing conference, an international one, yung isa na puntahan namin lugar, nasa coastal areas o tourism area, sabi dito, marami kayo makikita magandang example. Ang pinakita sa amin ay yung mga corals na kanilang nakuha at display. Sabi namin, wala ang dekorasyon nyo dito. Ayaw na namin dito. In the same way that when we're organizing a seminar here in Baguio, and there's one hotel here along Leonard Wood Road. Sabi sa amin, dito maganda. Pagpasok namin, andun yung ulo ng mga hayop na kanila. Wildlife, specimen na display. Inurungan din namin yun. Because we don't like to support businessmen. We have that kind of destructive mentality. Sa kanila, maganda, tourism item. Sa atin hindi. Because that means, buti dito, wala dapat ha. O sige. Our marine mollusks, dami yan, green fishes. Pero sana yung round scad, yung garunggong, ay hindi na nanggagaling sa ibang lugar. We've been importing that for so long, illegally. But your president recently said to the department secretary, sige na, gawin ng official ang pag-import ng galunggong para mas mura na ang galunggong sa palengke. Okay. Tumatawag na naman. So anyway, what's important is to know also is what are the benefits that we are getting. Okay? So hindi lang yung this is how rich we are and this is the many endemic species. It's also important to know what we are getting from them. So yun yung ecosystem services na binagay ko kanina. So for instance, forests. I've been working in areas with forests for so long. Yung mga funding agencies na samahan ko ay puro sa forest. Plant species, source of food, source of medicinal resources, interest ecosystem, that's number one. Alam pa ba natin ito? O nasa Mercury na lang tayo kumukuha. Dito sa Cordillera, what was nice before was we even had yung mga home garden, baang. Kaya wala na. Nobody would like to plant backyard areas. Okay? Both in the interior areas and even more so in the urban areas. We also have forests holding water and preventing soil erosion. So we need trees that have good rooting system, rooting network. Malalim at malapad ang inaabot ng roots because they will hold the soil that way. Not coconut, because coconut is shallow-rooted. Pag matindi ang ulan, ang bagyo, babagsak ang coconut. What is bad is, your government, your DNR, is saying that, hey, if we had as much as 40 to 50% forest by the 1950s, naging 30% na lang yan noong 70s, at naging 10% na lang yung ating prime forest pagdating ng 1990s. Sabi ng DNR, ngayon daw, na-recoup na daw natin yan at 23% na daw forested Pilipinas. 23%? That includes your banana plant, which is not a tree, and your coconut, which is shallow-rooted. Okay? Yes? Do I see heads nodding? When what we must be enriching, what we must be restoring, are the hardwood species that are also endemic, that are native to the Philippines. That's what we want to happen in the reforestation programs of the government. Not the exotic species and not plantations, but a mixed group of 3 species. Okay? We want forests with trees that are main sequesters of carbon dioxide in the land areas. And forests that can help regulate the climate to keep us a little cooler than being very affected by the fast warming setting we have. I think I saw Mita finally, and it's that regreening of the forest patch of GSIS that Soroptovis is protecting now. You know the tree park beside Convention Center? Yes. And the UP faculty made a comparison. That area is cooler than UP Baguio, but it is fast. I mean, no. That temperature is getting warmer and warmer because the trees are being used. 0.5 degrees centigrade. That's the difference of the climate between UP Baguio, which is across the street, and the forest patch. Kaya kailangan talaga maraming puno. Keep it cooler. Ano po yun? Madam naman akong got that question answer well. Let's try to finish this. It's very interesting, especially for us in the Cordillera. We have unique attractions that can bring in tourists, but which is also important to maintain. The bats are there in the caves. And the bats are important for pollination all over. Lalo na yung fruit bats, yung seeds, na dumi nila sa mas malayong lugar. Important for pollination. And then, for items in research, amphibians, reptiles, they are in rainforests that we have. The majority of forests we have are really with rainforest trees. And in the marine areas, especially the marine protected areas, the coral reefs are very important. Minsan ang alam natin, kinakain natin eh. Hindi natin alam that each one is related, is connected. But not only those in the market should be protected, therefore just by buying, but even in the sources. Ito nakakatawa ito If we want to market fresh fish now, or at least frozen fish, daming sample, pinipili ko kung ano yung mag-apply sa inyo eh. Ito na lang example. Yung mabibili nyo sa, hindi sa SME boycott yan, sa, sa ibang areas. Mga mamaya hindi na sa Pilipinas galing. When I go to hotels or restaurants and they get a menu for fish, sliced fish. Ano tawag namin? You get dory. Saan galing ang dory, mga kapatid? Which you can usually find being served in restos. In the Mekong Delta. Mekong. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. And that area is very dirty. But dory is among the cheapest. Amana is among the cheapest to buy now. Cheaper than our native fish. But why? That's because of trade already. Okay? It's something else. But it's very difficult to identify native species that we are seeing. The juju, what do you call that? Juju, whatever you call it here. We still have it in the rivers. And then you have to know, okay, mangroves. I think this has been demonstrated the past 3 to 5 years in Latin, that areas in the islands in the country that have good mangrove stands are able to withstand the storm surges and the typhoons. I'm leaving with you this slide presentation, so just listen and you watch me, because I like to perform also. I'm challenging you, but try to recall where you have seen this and what is being done, okay? Never mind the snails being eaten as escargot, but remember, those are the golden snails that are destroying the rice lands, which is introduced, not native. So we'll be careful in our lunch for the dark. Okay. So fish, you see this, and although I don't eat this anymore, but your crab and your shrimp that you can get in the brackish waters, where the rivers and the salt water would meet. Those are the best areas for raising crabs. But they eat anything. That's why crabs are dirty. But the real marine people do not eat that, because they eat the pollution. Corny ko talaga, no? Sorry, But these are the things we must know. In biodiversity, there are so many different choices, but I still like crabs. However, where they will go is important to protect. Your talakitok, when it goes to the sea, it will be talakitok, but when it chooses the river, the fresh water, that's the malipato. Okay? The malipato that is being sought in Tagaytay and Batangas is the same species as your talakitok. But it's in the brackish waters that you see the differentiation of the species and the varieties. So don't turn those coastal areas into wharves, but for tourism and for sending off cargoes of goods, we're turning coastal areas with different kinds of uses already, tourist sites or for wharves. Warp. Di ba ang plural ng warps? Okay. Because it also will destroy the areas that are important for the reproduction and the development of these marine resources. Okay, I mentioned this already, it is very well known. So, this is our challenge number 1. We are the hottest of 25 diverse countries. What does being hot mean? Being destroyed. Hottest, most being destroyed. By unit area, we're number 1. Of the 25 diverse by unit area, we're also the most destroyed in biodiversity. And that destruction is very fast. Okay. For speciation can really happen, and for the species to be developed into maturity, they're fast being threatened. So even if you look at the phytoplanktons, nagbabago yung itsura nung maliliit pa lang na organism. So you look at this is the recent data, 932 out of 11,046 endangered and extinct species in the Philippines. See that we're number 4 globally. Hindi na only in the Philippines today. At least we're number 4 here, we're not at number 1. In the endangered and extinct. That's the classification that we don't want to happen. You can see the red icons here, there, right? Those are the areas with endangered and extinct. These are the hot, this is the areas that are being destroyed. And you take note, many of them are in the south countries compared with the north. This is another example I forgot to cite this. Sino kumakain ng fish na menu ng McDonald's? Hindi Dory yun. Sino may alam doon? Yeah, that's important. And that's in the very far deep seas where McDonald's can source them. That's mga Scandinavia, up north. Anyone can fish. Corporations can fish freely because the states have no regulation. We are eating them now before they are lost. So there are pronouncements also from many environmentalists that say McDonald's is getting it very quickly because there are no regulations, but that means we're eating the resources already far off the northern seas. Why the hottest? Because we have this. There is deforestation, unregulated logging is there. There's forest degradation, meaning there is land use conversion. From forest to mining, forest to residential areas that are nakadon. High-end, hindi ba ano na yan? Puso na rin sa mayayaman? Ang mountainous and hilly areas. They're nice to live in. In Baguio, everything is in the uplands and the skyline is lost. Dami ng puro building eh. Okay. You know this happening in Baguio, right? Okay. And then there's also land use conversion by having more and more and more roads. subdivisions, yes, for settlements, I said, but for roads and roads. Good or bad? Na-book kasi na kayo kaya kayo And then there's excessive and unregulated use from the coastal and mid-shore to the remote open ocean. That's the example of McDonald's. Fish fillet, that's what it's called, right? Fish fillet, fish. Friends, you can just eat that if you want, huh? Don't feel, pag sabihin niya, sabi niyo yung Boquiren eh, huwag na daw eh. Okay lang. And then there's underwater debris. All of us knows this. Our zero waste group here, I hope, will understand what's happening in the marine waters, not just in the land and the rivers, in the Cordillera. Okay? The example, yung styrofoam, yung baso, glass. Ano yung tawag siya? Styrofoam. O, ano na si turtle, no? And turtles are our, parang yan ay indicator species of how clean the environment is. If they are lost, or they are being lost, that means your seas are becoming dirty. And if the coastal areas are being turned into tourism areas, where will they lay the eggs? Okay. Indicator species yan. And then you have anthropogenic underwater noise. This is a contentious point. When we were in Batangas doing the rounds, the fishermen say their catch is affected by the sound of the malampaya pipes. Malampaya, the source of natural gas. The DNR says no, that's not true. But the fishermen are the ones saying that when the pipes are active, operational, the sound gets absorbed by the fish. Ignore that. There are also those who are saying that, you know, this source ng wind power natin. Some are also saying that the sound bites are being felt by the marine resource, by the seas. Pag-aralan natin, because tama daw yun, totoo yun eh. Pag-aralan natin later. Okay, what do we have here? Garbage. But underneath, below this garbage in the seas are this. What they are in their lowest form, wala pa nung sila ay planktons, bago mag-develop fully into what you know as the crabs that you eat, or the lobsters, or the sapsap, or the galunggong. They are being affected already. From the time that they are very small until they are developed and are ready to reproduce. Kaya importante that we think of them even when they are still either one cell or as they. Okay? So now, I will ask us to look into the second challenge, and this is climate change. When you took up climate change first day, right? Okay. So we will differentiate the natural from the man-made factors. And the climate change we're talking about is what happened in 1850, the second industrial revolution, not the first, which used steam power, but industrial also machines, but manufacturing, but not the 1850, the second industrial revolution that made petrol-based chemicals more important, and yes, petroleum. oil, chemicals. That's what really causes this very, very fast warming up. Manong, imagine 1850 pa, sinisira na pala. And we've been enjoying the improvements in lifestyle, technology, etc. Only to realize now, 2018, that construction has been happening as early as that time. Okay, so you have the man-made factors there, causing the danger from the damage to, in terms of physical destruction and depletion of resources. So, if you look at the challenge to the projected impacts, I think this was discussed already. From 0 degrees centigrade, that's baseline, and up to 1 degree centigrade, the warming up level. We are here in the 1.5 that was signed in Paris. And what we don't want to happen is a 2%, 2 degrees centigrade. Where are we now in the Philippines? What do you think? We're 2.5 degrees centigrade already. Higher. But this is global average, okay? Which means areas that are really very warm and dry, and those that are very wet with too much rain, nagbabaliktad ang pattern, dahil yan, di ba? This is what's happening already. Water supplies threatened in several areas. We started experiencing this. Okay? Up to 1.5 degrees centigrade already. We also have extensive damage to coral reefs happening in the last 20 years in particular. But now, where we are, we have rising intensity of storms. We're experiencing that. That's our present. We're falling crop yields. My personal friend here is saying, Kalinga has been having more and more and more rains in the last 5 years. There's really reduction in the uptake. Okay. And then we have harvest. We have significant decreases in water availability. The ones where I put a mark, green marker there, is where we are present. What we've been moving into, what is yet to be predicted. What is being predicted, we're experiencing some of them now. And what we will have more so in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Okay. But it's no longer cold. It's no longer cool, right? That's changing microclimate in the last 10 to 20 years. So this was tackled the other day. And therefore, what are ways forward? Now, wala ko ng 5 minutes dito, just to complete this. So this is the third part in the outline. What must we do? We must conserve. Conservation is wise use. Wise use. You can use, but use wisely. Okay. We must restore. The course in youth value for Master of Science, graduate level, is with the theme conservation and restored ecology. Restoration, reforestation is one example of restoration ecology. Plant endemic species will actively enhance the planting wherever, whether you are in the mountains or even in urban areas. have protected areas, and not only what the government identifies, but even the ICCA's. CCA means conservation. I can't remember the acronym, but this is in areas with IPs where you include ancestral domains. They're not included in the protected areas, but we are expanding the scope of conservation. And then we have marine protected areas. And from the experience that we've been having for the past 20 years, we don't need just marine protected areas. We want networks of marine protected areas. It's very difficult to identify the boundaries in municipal orders. So what's important is to connect all of them in a network so that they cooperate with each other. If you get to a place in the Cordillera, let's say one municipality where you have higher up areas to flat areas, and how does the river water flows from top down, right? The reforestation that must happen must follow the watershed management scheme from the higher to the lower level. Connect them. Barangays and towns and municipalities must not operate separately of each other. They must be connected from reach to reef. That's the approach we're heading. So this is the model I have summarized. We are there at the lower level, Homo sapiens sapiens, okay? The culture is our role there. But we do conservation from reef to reach, from the marine conservation to freshwater to terrestrial, at what we're calling as landscapes or seascapes, because they are connected. And in climate change, we do either mitigation or adaptation. Na-discuss ito on Monday. Adaptation is what we can do to adjust to man-made disasters. Mitigation is what we do to regulate, even to redirect the actions so that we can slow down the heating up, we can slow down the destruction that's happening. Okay? So that's where we need science more than in adaptation, while DRM is more important for adaptation. It's always to think of biodiversity conservation this way, no? We're connecting up to the seascape and the landscape scale. And therefore when we say act locally but connect globally also, this is what we mean. Not just the reef to reach in region 1 or Ilocos, but we're talking of northern Luzon, because that's connected. Especially the Cordillera here, the Sierra Madre there. Connected yan, ha? Problema kung pinakal mong pareho. Nasa gitna, and that's where we are, we're going to be affected. That will explain why the Ifugaos, because they move out of Ifugao because of primogeniture, only the eldest son will inherit. So what happens is the other children must look for their own residence. So those that do not inherit land are the informal settlers. For instance, in Isabela. They live in Ifugao, they move up, but they deforest. Siya migrate. Okay. So these are the considerations. It's important to take note of this, but I studied this some more. That's why I'm leaving the PPT, the PowerPoint presentation. Biodiversity is distributed unevenly in the Philippines. It's not the same all over. So we must really look into the specifics of where we are. Nag-match ba sa elevation natin yung 3 species na nire-recommend ng FMB, yan ba ay nagmamatch sa kalagayan natin? Geographically, geologically, geomorphologically. Okay. The forests in the Philippines are a mosaic of different types of formations. Some Tomas and something like 4 different forest types. Mount Santo Tomas Water Reserve, no? I'm talking about that. Not just the green patch across or at the side of Convention Center where you have a bull and pine tree. Napaka kulang sa diversity. Okay? And that's, plantations are not what we need. We need more diverse planted areas. So, biodiversity protection means no plantations. And then for habitat integrity, the quality, important areas because they are rare or they are really very, very specific. And trees are small because the area is rich in minerals. What shall we do? Forget the forest and mine the area? That's a challenge, no? But that's happening already. And areas where we have richness in marble. The marble is being mined out, but below that are caves. Pag inubos yung marble, ang water mo babagsak. No? Masisira yung mga nasa caves. Okay. This is something that I hope you will also consider because whether you're doing mitigation or adaptation, and even before you move into real development work, we have these strategies. We've been working using this model since 2002. We have different players, policymakers, and field-based actors. We have the range of conservation actions that can be done, and the diversity also in stakeholders or actors. And there is a way by which you can do some kind of targeting that's time-bound. Within the next 5 years, within the next 10 years, within the next 20 years. In restoration ecology, we do not recommend one-year projects only. One is strategic planning with a vision that may be for the next 10 to 20 years, so that we know that nothing is really being derailed or misdirected or worse, destroyed. Okay? Sana umabot yung action sa ganito, hindi yung 1 year lang. So even your zero waste, you're not able to do, sige, zero waste lang, mahirap na yan eh. Pero nakakailan tayo, nakakatatlong taon na?
3 years.
Oh, already. Para pagka 5th year, mas marami na mangyayari, no? Hindi na lang collection. I have this also, but I'll just mention to you the references because when I did this in 2007, it is for all elevation points to the marine. And whether you are working on policies or working on field-based action, and even managing population with population growth rates that are recommended. So these are things that I can share with you. There are also conservation. Ito for advocates, I'd like to recommend this for further study. I didn't include them there, but it's a way to show that there are differences in scale, there are differences in the agencies that are involved, and therefore, what must guide them is eco-governance that must have transparency, political will, and good management. Parang wala tayo ganyan in the past 2 years and in the next 4 years. Okay. Do they have good governance already? Yun. So, we cannot have good biodiversity conservation if we do not have good governance also. Really? Yeah. Okay. And at the end, these are the themes that I hope, the principles that will guide us. Always think and act locally, but we think at a much larger scale, across levels. Don't just be a friend of the barangay captain, be a friend also of the city council, the chief executive, SANA, and the regional offices that are a branch only of the national government agencies. So, the EMB in Baguio cannot say Sky Ranch is okay, because who is not familiar with the Sky Ranch Park? Is everybody familiar with that? The one at the SM area? It's very noisy to the classes in UP, UC, and the Baguio City National High School. Okay, ito na lang babanggitin ko why we need to think across levels, across the hierarchies, and across the functions of agencies. The environmental clearance certificates being used there justify the Sky Ranch. As the EMB explained in the meeting 2 weeks ago, was the clearance for a different site, for a different project within the SM area. That's the lie that we are going to fight against. Okay? You cannot have an environmental clearance certificate for this area, but use it 10 years later for another area. Okay? That's what we mean by good eco-governance across levels and scale, sector and discipline. You must know that the thinking and the working, the acting, must be connected. For the good, not for the worse. To attain human and ecosystem well-being. Thank you very much. I would like to stop with that.